Hello and welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is American Ben, and today we're going to break down all of the characters in Squid Game. Now, I know that those of you who have been around these parts for a while probably expect something more in-depth than that. Something in the way of a deep dive into an individual character's background and psychology. Well, that's definitely something I'm planning to do next week on Generation Ochi, my anime and East Asian drama channel. As a matter of fact, I've heard a rumor that over on Ochi right now, there's a just published, very long and comprehensive explainer video on everything Squid Game. So if you want more in the way of human beings brutally murdering each other, you sickos, then after you finish this video, head on over there. However, I'm lumping all of the characters together in a more basic explainer video today because Squid Game is massively popular. It's the rare K-drama that has permeated the mainstream, and so most viewers are probably going to be searching out some more basic fare before looking to chew on the heavier stuff. So for now, here's a good explanation as to what makes each character tick. First up, we have the show's central character, Song Gi-hoon. Gi-hoon's character doesn't only arc as his own growth comes about, but also as we learn more about what's in his heart. When we first meet him, he seems like a pretty seedy guy, replete with deadbeat dad status and a bad gambling habit. However, over the course of the show, we come to know his true self to be empathetic and caring. He goes out of his way to look over North Korean defector Sebiak, though he sort of messes that one up. He partners with an old man in the marbles game in order to look out for him, and he joins the competition in the first place to win custody of his daughter and help his mom pay her medical bills. Gi-hoon is a good guy gone awry in a corrupt capitalist system, yet what's most interesting to observe about him is how he loses his way, that is, via pride and good intentions that pave the way to, well, you know, the dentist. Gi-hoon gets himself into financial trouble because he's a prideful person. He doesn't want to admit that he's lost or unsure how to repair his and his family's lives. This is why at the train station, when he finally beats the game representative in a round of Yaki, he goes to slap the rep rather than collect his owed cash winnings, which is what he would have done if he was truly a soulless seeker of the almighty one. I swear, do not make any soulless Korea pun jokes in the comments below, or I will find you. But there's still a problem here. Gi-hoon continues to play because he gets frustrated at losing. And rather than walk away a little worse for wear, he takes slap after slap after slap, and in all his body absorbs a beating before he leaves. This is indicative of how Gi-hoon probably often gets too invested in poor habits or practices, all because he can't give up, admit he took an unwise path, and try something else. He loses money betting on horse racing, but he just keeps betting because he doesn't want to admit it's led him to nothing but further poverty. This is how people get so lost in unrestrained, greedy economic systems. They feel the pressure to compete in the market and become super rich, so they invest in risky endeavors, they lose and lose, but keep believing they can win and don't want to admit failure, and so they keep pressing on, spending more money, and failing on and on. What's important to take from this is that even amiable, honest people can lose grip of their values in a valueless system. Next up is Gi-hoon's friend Sang-woo, a successful investor and a wanted felon for divesting his clients of their funds. This character is one we are led to believe has been completely tarnished from soul outward by the cutthroat, callous business world. He acts maliciously towards his supposed friends throughout the games in order to save himself and win the dough. After all, he is someone who is willing to off just about anyone to take home the competition's grand prize. However, I don't think he's intended to be presented as a deeply malevolent purveyor of evil, but rather as someone who knows the system, has been jaded by it, and acts accordingly. Thus, it's the system that's evil, not necessarily the person. If you were to ask Sang-woo why he does such sinister things to others, like betray Ali or attempt to prevent Ji-young from joining his tug-of-war team because she's a woman, he'd tell you it's because it's every man for himself. Not by his preference, but by the ingrained mechanisms of society.
넌 그냥 죄 없는 사람을 죽인 거야.
정신 차려! 어차피 우리가 저 돈 가지고 나가려면 다른 놈들 다 죽어야 돼.
He believes that the death games, and by extension the market, are zero-sum games. His loss is others' gain, and vice versa, and he's not totally wrong. That's exactly how the competition works. Not only does one's death increase the winnings of the remaining players, but in some of the games, some people must die. In the marbles game, a person's opponent has to die. What would you do in his situation in that game? Play fair and risk your life, or do whatever you can to live on? I imagine you may be surprised to see what you think when your survival instincts kick in. So, what we must take from Sang-woo is that while his actions are depraved because the system is too, it's hard to completely condemn him while remaining intellectually honest. The one thing we can say about Sang-woo, though, is that he has conflated survival with profit. He doesn't need to win the game to survive, he can convince the group to vote their way out, but he sees the money as vital to his life, and I guess while this is a common way people become misguided in greedy societies, he's once again not totally wrong. He's in a lot of debt. Next up, we have Kang Sebiak, the North Korean defector who has joined the game in order to win the money she needs to rescue her other surviving family members from north of the border. I don't want to go too in-depth on her here because I think that over on Ochi, I'm going to do a dedicated video on this character. But what's most important to glean from her personality and actions is how the dark side of the system must sometimes be traversed in order to survive and even do the right thing.
4천. 중국으로 가는 비용만 그렇고 거기서 다시 남조선으로
Sebiak isn't violent or dishonest by nature, or at least she isn't necessarily naturally violent or dishonest, but the people who control the mechanisms that both deliver her from North Korea and can help bring her mother over to the south as well are corrupt. And so the person she presents as in the show is who she has to become in order to get the things she wants. Things which anyone would want. Good things, family, and safety. She can't get this through legal authorized channels. She must descend into the murk in order to better her life. Think about what that means for larger society. Next up is Oh Nam, the old terminally ill man and secretly the game's creator and host. Why did Oh Nam create the competition?
뭘 하면은 좀 재미가 있을까?
Fun. He and his clients in the lending industry want to spice up their boring lives, and so they decide to leverage struggling people's debts against them to push them into the game. There's two main things to take from observing Il-nam. First, he may long for the innocence and fun of childhood, but because he's an adult deeply ingrained in the fiend-filled market, he too is corrupt. And so when he recreates childhood games, they're no longer fun and innocent, but violent and contemptible. Second, while a second season of the show may or may not reveal a more sage and benevolent side of him, for now, he appears to be a libidinous gambler. He's a moneylender, a master of the market, and someone who takes advantage of people's desperation in order to get rich. However, he, as a self-admitted bored 1%er, gets his kicks from getting other people to take risks and gamble with their wealth and health as well. For his own pleasure, he toys with the masses. Their plights are not real to someone so detached from the lives of ordinary people, and we can infer that the show would like us to believe that it's not just Il-nam who functions like this, but the entire elite class of the system. Next up, we have Duck-soo, a gangster from the streets who is on the run from some even worse people who are looking to collect the money he owes them. On one hand, Duck-soo is a wolf among sheep in the system. He thrives at its points of utmost turpitude. But on the other hand, he's actually just a small fry. Even vile criminals like him are pawns to the masters of the game. What's interesting to witness in his case is how his violent, vicious behavior wins him obedience from others and gets him rather far in the game. In a corrupt, morally inept system, the nastiest actor sometimes is best fit to survive. I know Sang-woo would certainly agree with this. Though Sang-woo is benevolent when he can be, but Duck-soo spreads malice near and far, within the game and without, and for it makes his fair share of enemies because he doesn't have the cunning to assemble a social facade worthy of profit. A much needed artifice when I face a system that shows polish and appears civilized, but in actuality is deeply poisoned. Next up, we have Abdul Ali, an immigrant from Pakistan who has joined the game in the hopes of winning enough money to support his family. Ali is a great control to check our theories about the show's themes against. See, he's almost entirely pure-hearted, and as he is not born to South Korea's system run amok, he's more humane and lacks the greed and selfishness endemic to his adopted nation. His goodwill and compassion ultimately makes him unfit for the market and leads him to an untimely death. However, the reason he's a useful control here is because while he's so pure, he still can't avoid becoming violent and harming others, or of course ending up in the death games. This goes to show the system condemns all to some level of moral failing, whether one submits to its ways or not. Next up is Han Min-yo, a somewhat mysterious woman who we don't know much about, other than that at one point she claims to have a child. Obviously, she's a manipulative person, and a pretty untactful one at that. She goes around trying to win the affections of the various players by pitching herself as a valuable addition to their repertoire, and by singing sweet nothings into their ears.
화장실 좀 갔다 와서 생각해볼게.
Our job isn't to demonize her for being so duplicitous, but to try and understand why she acts the way she does. In a highly developed and materialistic society that values profit over everything else, and within which a sort of carnal craving for wealth is ubiquitous, a fairly ruthless rat race results, and it's tough for the average person to survive while competing in it. If the system structure and function were different, perhaps Min-yo could have cultivated a less devious side of her personality. But in the world she lives in, especially as a woman and an aging woman at that, she must use whatever tools she has to survive. In this way, she's a tragic figure because she's looked upon as a bit of an unscrupulous person. But life is tough, and she appears to be desperate to survive. Eventually, the system drives her mad and she offs herself. She'll be called crazy, I guess I kind of just called her crazy, and maybe she did lose her mind, but we have to consider how the brutality of her environment leads her to her doom. Next, I want to briefly go over some of the more minor characters as well. First, there's Hwang Jun-ho, an honest cop who is determined to find out what happened to his brother, a man we come to learn is the game's frontman. I think what's important about his character is that he doesn't suspect his brother could be a perpetrator of this depraved competition. I'd parallel this with how Song-woo's mother sees her son as sort of an angel, a good man, and not at all someone who could steal money or hurt others. We can all understand this. People know the true nature of their family members, or rather, they know the innocent child their brother or sister emerged out of, so they don't see how the system has slowly corrupted them. Jun-ho loves his brother and assumes he's been kidnapped. And perhaps then we can assume that his brother isn't all bad or hasn't always been all bad. But he, like many others, has lost himself in the dark depths of a rotten system, a system which threatens to turn everyone within it, from rich man to poor, wretched. Ji-young is the woman who teams up with Sebiak and loses her life in the marbles game. Prior to entering the competition, she spends time in prison for killing her abusive father. She's certainly someone who presents as cynical while hiding away a good heart. She has the nature and potential to be bubbly and adventurous, but the system has drained her of much of her joy. However, I think what's interesting about her is that some of the things she says implies that she's a bit faithless and feels stained by the blood of her father.
내가 그들의 희생과 주님의 선택에 감사하며 기도를 올리는 것이다.
지랄. 지 손으로 죽여놓고.
She knows her father was an evil man, but vile deeds, even if somewhat justified, eat away at the minds of the people who commit them, most specifically when such people are not wired for iniquitous action. The terrible circumstances Ji-young is born into pushes her towards pain and peril, and for it, she's rewarded with eternal inner turmoil. People, decent people like her, feel fault for the bad things they do when the system bears some responsibility as well, and even at times, leaves them with no choice. Anyways, that's my breakdown of all the major and semi-major characters in the show. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do give it a big thumbs up. Now head on over to Generation Ochi and check out the comprehensive explainer video on the show I did over there, but not before subscribing to this channel if you haven't already, and hitting that damn notification bell so you don't miss a damn thing. For now, my name is American Ben, and I'll catch you next time. Generation Films, peace.